Thank you so much for agreeing to do this interview with me. And I would like to start with if you can introduce yourself and also tell me what your occupation is.
Yeah, my name is Thomas Kennedy, and I work with immigration advocacy organizations, like the Florida Immigrant Coalition.
So my first question is, what is the law that Governor DeSantis has introduced, and what are some potential impacts?
Yeah, so I mean, there's a lot of legislation that the governor has introduced since, assuming his current position in terms of, anti immigrant policy. This last one, I think, is probably the worst one of them all. It's a bit of like a anti-immigrant omnibus package, and it does a lot of things. So originally, um, it would have made it a third-degree felony to have an undocumented person in your home or car, um, even if they're your family member. And that would be enhanced to a second-degree felony if it was a minor, even if it was your child. That was actually stripped out of the package, but that original provision was actually passed in Kansas right after the Florida law, and it was vetoed by the governor and then overridden by a legislature. So that law actually exists in Kansas, which is crazy. But in Florida, basically the law would make it a third-degree felony to traverse state lines with a non-documented person in your car, even if they're a family member. It would make it a second-degree felony if it's a child. And again, it doesn't matter if it's your child or not. It's just still considered a second-degree felony. It invalidates local funding for community ID programs. These are programs that are in partnership with local governments to basically provide an ID that can't be used for driving or flying. It's not a real ID as the legal term, yeah, it prohibits local funding. The programs can still exist, but with private funding. It would force emergency healthcare rooms and healthcare providers that accept Medicaid dollars to ask the immigration status of patients, although the patients are not required to answer, but the providers are required to ask. It also invalidates driver's licenses from other states that give undocumented people driver's licenses. There's I think 15 in the District of Columbia, New York, Massachusetts, Utah, California. It would also repeal a law that was signed by Rick Scott in 2014 that allows DACA recipients and undocumented folks to practice law in the state of Florida if they are licensed and passed the Florida bar. So it's going to be repealed by the year 2028. And finally, it establishes E-Verify, which is a system to check the immigration status of employees. And it obviously for the public sector, this would be the case, but also for private companies that have 25 or more employees. So it's a lot of stuff.
So yeah, it is.
Yeah, and
How,
there's like other stuff in there, but these are like the pillars of it.
yeah, yeah. How does it affect immigrants or refugees living in Florida once this law is like comes to an effect, like fully into an effect?
Well, in a lot of ways, I mean, I was undocumented. Undocumented people like to take road trips when they go on vacation because they're afraid to get on a airplane for domestic flights. So if they were gonna leave the state line, leave Florida, they come back. It's a felony for them now. So they're basically like prisoners within the state now. Obviously for employees, workers, they're gonna be scared to go to their work site, scared to be fired because of the E-Verify provision. Employers are gonna be scared to hire undocumented people. In terms of the provision about traversing state lines, there's a lot of entities that do these sorts of trips, like schools, for example, for field trips, or faith institutions for church camp, or trips that they may take. So it's going to impact a lot of these institutions as well. The community ID programs, they exist in 4 counties right now: Miami-Dade, Broward, Palm Beach, and Alachua. And they've given thousands of IDs to people that would otherwise would have no identification. I mean, there's the programs are going to continue to take place. but of course, like funding is a big part of keeping these programs running, obviously. So there might come to an end at some point, and that means less IDs, for people that really need them to overcome basic obstacles in their day-to-day lives. Again, I was telling you, like, there might be you know undocumented lawyers, they're going to lose their licenses by 2028. So these are people who are going to have to move to other states if they want to continue, their livelihoods. And the other part is the healthcare part, right? Because that's going to create a climate of fear and intimidation, in terms of people seeking healthcare, immigrants, undocumented people. So they're already less likely to get healthcare because lack of just plain access to it, lack of insurance, lack of being able to afford it. But now they're going to be scared about getting asked their immigration status. So there's a lot of implications to this. I mean, the part about invalidating driver's licenses from other states. I mean, there's like a lot of truckers actually like bring cargo and loads into Florida from California that might be driving on one of these California licenses. Now they're invalidated. They're running a risk bringing stuff here to Florida, working in the state. So yeah, it's pretty broad.
And you sort of kind of answered the question, but we know that immigrants or undocumented have a huge impact on the economy of the whole country, actually. Um, but how do you think now that this law has passed or is going to go into an effect, how would it affect the economy of the Florida?
How would it affect the economy of Florida? Um, I think that's a big question. Obviously, I think the state there's three pillars, right, that keep the economy running: agriculture, construction, and hospitality. And those are all powered by immigrant labor, right? So a lot of these major agricultural companies are going to be they're going to be really squeezed in terms of being able to hire people. A lot of like the nurseries that work in Homestead or other or North Florida, they're also going to be really squeezed in terms of hiring people. There's a lot of construction projects in Florida that are dependent upon immigrant labor. I mean, there's so much development, for better or for worse, in the state. And those projects are already coming into a halt, and the law hasn't even been signed into effect. It's supposed to be signed into effect July 1st. But we're already seeing work sites operating at less than half capacity across the state because of the fear, both again from employees and employers. In fact, I saw emails of info sessions that are being organized by the employers for employers, not for the employees, to deal with the quote great amount of incertitude that SB 1718 has created. So and also just a lot of immigrants are just leaving, so that means less purchasing power, less spending power, less less of a workforce. Another thing that's probably going to happen is that a lot of people are going to work under the table, right? And that's non-taxable income, so that's like less revenue for the state and for municipalities, for the federal government, whatever, because immigrants contribute billions of dollars in taxes. So yeah, I think it's pretty detrimental and counterproductive to the economy of Florida.
Yeah. Would you think that now that it affected the Florida economy, would it affect the other states as well? Since a lot of things could be, how would you say it? Contribute like from Florida, exported to other states or other countries. How would you think that that would affect the economies or the economy overall of the United States?
Well, I mean, I wouldn't be able to tell you like the blowback effect on other states. I mean, I could picture the blowback here in Florida, like, but like I told you, this is being replicated in Kansas, right? So if these types of laws are being duplicated in other states, yeah, you're gonna see the damage being spread. But we'll see what the impact. This type of laws have been tried in other states. Arizona obviously passed SB 1070 years ago, and that was like so detrimental to the state, and they ended up having to like walk that back. Alabama passed a similar a law years ago. They also had to walk that back after like crops were left rotting in the fields. So we'll see.
Yeah.
I mean, it's definitely
Uh,
gonna impact like the orange industry, like for sure.
yeah.
I mean, I
What
like a lot of like strawberries, watermelons, okra, like a lot of crops are grown here. So we'll see how that impacts the rest of the country.
would you think that actual Americans would do those jobs that immigrants are doing? Would they be willing to actually start doing those jobs, since we hear a lot where they're like, "Oh, immigrants are taking our jobs," but how much are they willing to do those
Like,
jobs?
agriculture in Florida is really harsh. You know what I mean? Like it's really hot out there. It's really humid. The sun is really, really bright. I've been out there not working, but like, organizing and whatever, like, and it's really harsh. I worked construction actually. That I did do, not farm work, but I did do construction, and it's also really hard work. But especially like the agricultural work, it's so rough. Um, and it's like not well paid, and I mean like how much can you pay people? You know what I mean? Like what are they gonna start paying like $18 an hour, $20, $25? And even then, like I don't think people would do that work, for $20 because it's so rough. So I think it's very hard to fill those positions. It's very skilled labor. There's actually like people think that it's not, but it's actually extremely skilled labor. Um, so again, it's not just about like the wages. It's also just about the skill and the stamina and the endurance to do the work. And like I do want to say I saw DeSantis talk about this bill. They asked him, well, what about the blowback to Florida's economy? And he said something really interesting that I kind of agreed with him in terms of like his analysis, but I don't agree with his conclusion, obviously. So he said, you can't have an economy on the basis of illegality. And I think he is getting to something there, because in this country we do have, quite frankly, like a capitalist system that is based on never-ending growth at the expense of the exploitation of, like lowly paid workers, right? Um, but I don't think the solution is to take it out on the workers who are just doing the work that nobody else wants to do, for not great wages, and that's putting our food on the table across this country. Especially since these people haven't had a pathway to citizenship or any sort of immigration reform since 1986. You know what I mean? That's like before the internet. Like the world has changed a lot, and we're still, operating with mostly that immigration framework. That's crazy. And I'm rambling a little bit here, but I do want to finish this. In this country, at some point, I think in the 70s, people were like, okay, like eggs are a basic commodity, and like we need to make sure that like people can afford eggs, because like people need eggs. And
Yep.
then and they have um instituted like large government subsidies of eggs, right, to keep the price
Mm-hmm.
artificially low. So like the people like DeSantis, right, and the anti-immigrant crowd will always talk about, like, oh, like the illegal labor and American wages and blah blah blah. But the thing is like, okay, so like if we bring in all this like um, you know, like the American workforce, US citizen workforce to work this back-breaking work, and like they're gonna have to raise wages significantly. Like there's gonna be like an economic like like trickle down effect, that it's gonna the cost is gonna end up being passed over to the consumer, right? Like that means that we as consumers are gonna have to pay a lot more for these basic food items.
Mm-hmm.
So okay, but are you going to then like subsidize these goods, through the government, through the federal government, or wherever you can get the money from? No, because
Mm-hmm.
that's big government, right? So like they're not solutions oriented, and they're not serious people in terms of like talking about the like the contradictions within our economy. So like when DeSantis says that type of stuff, you can't take people like that seriously, because they are just grabbing like this much of the problem and like disregarding everything else, and they know what they're doing.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
So I know it's like a lot, but
No, that's okay. So what are the next steps after this law goes into an effect?
I mean, we're doing a lot of community protection, in terms of like info sessions, working with, existing institutions like faith leaders, community organizations, etc. We're definitely trying to educate both people to not that they don't have to reply this like immigration status question if you're by healthcare providers. And we're also trying to work with healthcare providers to educate them and see how they can push back on this as well. We're obviously mobilizing, like we saw yesterday. I mean, there were like thousands of people. There was like 3,000 people in Homestead on Saturday, 6,000 people yesterday in Immokalee, hundreds across the state. Definitely working with businesses to do more work stoppages, working with, allied elected officials to try to push back. And we are going to eventually present litigation like we have done in the past and won against other anti-immigrant laws that have been passed in the state. But we're definitely going to sue because this bill is definitely widely unconstitutional, and it's completely motivated by discriminatory intent. And it's there's so many like concerns about like invasion of privacy, right? Violations of privacy. I mean, the fact that like the traversing state lines clause, like that's crazy. And it's crazier that also like there's enhanced penalties if it's a minor, including your child. Like, yeah, so that type of stuff we're definitely gonna be exploring, and we're definitely gonna be litigating.